Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradhari Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradhari Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivaradhari Jasuranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopijana Balaba Girivaradhari Jasuranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopijana Balaba Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijana Balaba Girivaradhari Jasuranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. 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 Jaya Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajaka Acharya Stotara Sadashi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajaka Acharya Stotara Sadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Chegaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam Naraskricham Naram Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhagatir Bhagavati Daishtiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 24th chapter, text number 19, is that right? I can't see very well without my glasses, but I'm going to try my best. Ayam Sakya Sudaha Gana Gana Dishaha Sakya Acharya Hai Susumata Loke Kapila Iti Akyam Kanta Te Kirti Vandanaha Avam Sudha Gandadishaha Shankya Adaryadahai Sankhya Charya Yai Sumama Taha Loke Kapila Ityakyam Kansak Te Kitya Varanaha Ayam Surita Gandha Loka Kapila Ityakyam Kanta Te Kirti Vardanaha Loke Kapila Ityakyam Kanta Te Kirti Vandanaha. Anyone else? Ayam Gandita. No, this is okay. I'll survive. Ityakyam Gantate kirti samvanaha yam sita pragintataha lokakapila ityakyam gantate kirti vandanaha. Words for word. I am this personality of Godhead. Siddhagana of the performed sages, of the perfected sages. Adishaha, the head. Sankhya Acharyaha, Sankhya Acharyai, by Acharya's expert in Sankhya philosophy. Susumataha, approved according to Vedic principles. Loke, in the world. Kapilaha, Kapilaha iti, as Kapila. Akyam, celebrated. Ganta, he will go about. Teyar, Kiriti, fame. Vardhanaha, increasing. Translation. Your son will be the head of all the perfected souls. He will be approved by the acharyas, expert in disseminating real knowledge. And among the people, he will be celebrated by the name Kapila, as the son of Devahuti. He will increase your fame. And then repeat. Your son will be the head of all the perfected souls. He will be approved by the acharyas, expert in disseminating real knowledge. And among the people, he will be celebrated by the name Kapila. As the son of Devahuti, he will increase your fame. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sankhya philosophy is the philosophical system enunciated by Kapila, the son of Devahuti. The other Kapila, who is not the son of Devahuti, is imitation, as imitation. This is the statement of Brahma. And because we belong to Brahma's disciplic succession, we should accept his statement that the real Kapila is the son of Devahuti, and that real Sankhya philosophy is the system of philosophy which he introduced, and which will be accepted by the acharyas, the directors of spiritual discipline. The word susumataha means, open quote, accepted by persons who are counted upon to give their goal good opinion. Repeat. Sankhya philosophy is a philosophical system enunciated by Kapila, the son of Devahuti. The other Kapila, who is not the son of Devahuti, is an imitation. This is the statement of Brahma. And because we belong to Brahma's disciplic succession, we should accept his statements that the real Kapila is the son of Devahuti, and that real Sankhya philosophy is the system of philosophy which he introduced and which will be accepted by the acharyas, the directors of spiritual discipline. The word susamata means, open quote, accepted by persons who are counted upon to give their good counsel, to give their good opinion, close quote. Om Gyana Timanandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksuran Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dharati Svaparantikam Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langaya Tegirim Yatkripa Taraham Bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. Prabhupada is warning us that there are a lot of imposters, including those who use the same name as Krishna. And one of the things that has endeared Prabhupada to his followers was that he was very conscious of people that were imitations, people that were charlatans, people who gave false philosophy as real philosophy, people who masqueraded as Krishna, and people who were insincere. It was Prabhupada's guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who established the principle of yukta vairagya. We've seen photographs of him riding in convertible Bentley cars, wearing Western clothes, and hanging out with Englishmen wearing pith helmets. And he was criticized for his imitation of the sense, just like people were critical of watches and clocks when they were first invented. We can thank the Swiss people for inventing them, and for misusing calculators. There were a lot of professors who didn't even allow calculators into their classrooms, because at the push of a button you could find the secant or cosecant or sine or cosine in a lot of very involved trigonometric problems. But they all gave in eventually, not all, but most of them people, they gave into this sort of form of ludism, to become modern. And Prabhupada himself used telephones, airplanes, computers. And one of the reasons why he really liked the United States was that he could produce as many as 15 or 20 books in a very short time. Such things were not possible in his land, in West Bengal or in most of India at that time. But he was famous for saying simple living and high thinking. That was his slogan, that we could use painting, we could use computers, we could use telephones, we could use automobiles and airplanes to propagate Krishna consciousness in a better way. And all this was being done, in a sense, by his Guru Maharaj, who was very heavily criticized for his use of modern technology in propagating Krishna consciousness. So in a sense, this was all started by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the idea that you could use modern technology in place of Krishna. And now there's a lot of opposition, not a lot, but some severe opposition to artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and many other forms of research and writing. And even now, some of the professors, and many of them are adopting these techniques to save time and to give accurate forms of research and writing. Not all, but many. And as it was said in one television interview, that we have to be practical. And the use of technology has its practical effects. But in another sense, simple living, or going back to nature, and still using tables and mental agility is very important. And because of these modern techniques, we don't have to use all of these things any longer. But in a sense, the people who want a more simple life and to live without watches and clocks, to use sundials and things like that, even though they're not very accurate in cloudy weather, they have a point. And there's a very strong movement now to go back to the simpler ways of life, which require a lot of mental agility. But technology is ultimately beginning to triumph over technology, sort of thing. But Prabhupada was pointing out that there are many imposters, charlatans, and cheaters using the names of Krishna and Kapila and posing as very saintly people. I read an article fairly recently about a supposed guru who was acting in samadhi. He was sitting in a vyasasana, so to speak, and sitting very still with his eyes closed and not moving. And some people thought that maybe he wasn't alive, and other people thought that he was just in a spiritual trance. So eventually police were called to determine whether he was faking or whether he was really in some kind of a spiritual trance. And ultimately they determined that he was dead. So there's a lot of this going on, and it's still going on, and that's what kind of made the Hare Krishna movement unique. Radha Ekroth's father, I can't remember his name. He's German. The German devotees were for a time preaching in the country of Ireland, and this man, although he's about 6 feet tall, was wearing white. And he told me that one of the younger people that saw him, a young girl about 3 or 4 years old, was walking with her mother, and she looked at him and she said, "Look, Mama, an angel." Because he was wearing white clothes and he was acting in a kind of very saintly way. So these things do happen. And another incident that occurred when, I don't know if you saw the video that I showed last time I gave class about the people that were living in Bowery. They were pretty rough, and many of them were alcoholics, and one of them said that the Bowery is full of murderers and wife beaters and all kinds of sinners of every description. And I don't know if it still exists, the Bowery, but Prabhupada was preaching down there. And at a certain point, I think it was in May or June of 1966, Prabhupada moved his whole operation to 26 Second Avenue. And because most of us weren't very aware of Yukta Vairagya and didn't have automobiles and the very modern facilities, there was a walk up to 26 Second Avenue. And as I remember, it was about 1 kilometer away from where he was on the Bowery. The Bowery at that time was only about one city block of alcoholics and ne'er-do-wells, and people who were just, it was a kind of a Skid Row type of place. It's still part of Manhattan. And anyway, there was a walking thing. People walked single file. I was part of that procession, and it reminded me very much of an African safari, where in parts of Africa there aren't so many, there weren't at that time anyway, so many automobiles, and there was a lot of walking from place to place. So there were about maybe 10 or 11 people walking to 26 Second Avenue from the Bowery. That about a kilometer-long walk, and it was a single-file procession with Prabhupada in front. Prabhupada was carrying 2 suitcases. I remember, I was part of that procession, and I remember I was carrying a reel-to-reel Roberts tape recorder, about a 20-centimeter reel-to-reel tape recorder, very heavy, a very big piece of technological equipment. I was carrying them on one shoulder, propping it up against my head, and then it became so heavy that I put it on the other shoulder and still propped it against my head. But that was the first time that Prabhupada settled in 26 Second Avenue. But everyone had to walk. And he not only had a temple at 26 Second Avenue on the ground floor, but he had an apartment that was 1 floor up from there. As a result of a very important negotiation that happened about a week beforehand. But he didn't like the Bowery. I mean, he did like the Bowery, But it was kind of a controversial thing that a holy man, a saintly person, and a very distinguished person was living in the Bowery, because the Bowery at that time was full of flop houses and alcoholics living and dying on the streets of the city. It was called the Bowery, or even before it was 3rd Avenue. But anyway, at a certain point, Prabhupada decided to get a little better quarter when this place was arranged. And even though it's not very far away from the Bowery, it was at that time a little bit of a better neighborhood. Still a slum, so to speak, but a better kind of slum than the Bowery. The Bowery was the real dregs of society, as you saw in the black and white video. Even people that lived there said it was no good, and it was not a good place to be. And sometimes I would see people. I was living close by. I was paying at that time $55 every month, which was a very low figure to make music at all hours of the night, because nobody was living around there. They were just flop houses and drunks, and a few businesses, but not much was going on there. So the rent was very low, and it was a very, very interesting place. It was called an artist in residence flat. It was up on the 3rd floor. And that's where I met Prabhupada the first time. There were no temples at that time, and it was definitely in the Bowery. And in order to get in there the first time, there were 2 people that were very drunken, in a very drunken state, sitting on the concrete plinth just before we went in the front door. And I sort of had to push them aside to make my way up the stairs to meet Prabhupada. He was on the top floor, the 4th floor. In England, they call it the 4th floor, or the 3rd floor. But anyway, he was on the 4th floor, and I could hear the cymbals. I didn't know what they were, ching, ching, ching. And as I finally reached the top floor where Prabhupada was, I saw a little chink of light coming through the doorway. And so I went up to the front of the loft. The door was at the back of the loft, the back of the building, and there was a loft of about 100 square feet. And there was just bare light beams, no ceiling, slats or anything. It was just a very modest and simple, just a bare loft, so to speak. And a lot of people at that time who were artists used to use the artist in residence permission, and AIR was written on the front of the building, right on the front doorway. And Prabhupada was given this place to preach by an artist named Haridas or Harikon. And it was very difficult, and so I walked up to where he was preaching and sat down, and there were about 7 other people, and it was very dark. There was only a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling, no fixtures of any kind, and there was a big book spread out in front of Prabhupada with it was all in Sanskrit, so it was not only hard to understand what he was saying, but it was, when he was reading from the book, it was very hard to decipher what was being said because it was in a different language. But anyway, that was the beginning, and the first temple was on 26 Avenue. And as I mentioned, just within a few weeks of getting that empty storefront, there was an Oriental rug, a very decorated rug, and there were the walls were all painted white, and there was a cymbal used by drummers in rock and roll bands hanging from the ceiling, and it was being played by someone with a stick. And there was an Indian instrument called a tambura, which I donated to the temple. And as you heard, if you saw the video, there was a guy named Hayagriva or Howard Wheeler who was saying that when he met Prabhupada, he realized that he didn't have to take drugs to become sort of happy and high. And because Prabhupada said, you don't need these things. Your spiritual life is already there. And that he was one of the early devotees because he was very convinced that he was doing the right thing. So he stopped taking drugs. When I was in New Zealand about 16 years ago, I was in Auckland, New Zealand, walking rather fast. A person came up to me and started a conversation. I mean, he was a complete stranger, a person about 18, and I was maybe about 40 years old. And I thought, why is this stranger talking to me? And what's your name and where you're going and all this, and I didn't know what he was up to. Maybe I think he may have been part of the lesbian, gay. I don't know what he was, but anyway, he kind of realized, because I was dressed as a devotee and I looked like a devotee and I had shaved head and Sika, that I was one of these people who had a different faith conviction. So I didn't say much. I just listened, and then I told him that actually, he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to the bank." And that was the end of that conversation. He just didn't want to be part of someone who was that materialistic, that was going to the bank. Was part of Yukta Vairagya at that time, I guess we could say. This is a very important incarnation, sort of not exactly an incarnation, but Krishna himself, Lord Kapila Dev. And as we saw in pictures that some of the devotees had, he was walking the streets of this city without any clothes on, and people, even though there were urchins and imbeciles that were urinating on him and throwing sticks and rocks and dirt at him, he just didn't mind. He was in another dimension of life. And Prabhupada mentions that he was one of the appearances of Krishna himself, not just like the original Krishna in blue, but a full incarnation of Krishna called Kapila Dev. And he was walking the streets and he was being abused by a lot of people. So that happened. And then finally, after about a year of hardship, Prabhupada finally came to London. He traveled around the United States, and then after a year he came to London. And when he first came, he was greeted very nicely, and he didn't have to go through the usual immigration formalities. The immigration officials came to greet him at the bottom of the stairway from the airplane. And so Prabhupada didn't have to undergo the usual formalities, and then he went into what was then called the VIP room, which was on the ground level, and it had been drizzling as it usually drizzles in London at that time. That was in September of 1967. And some of the devotees paid their full dandavats to Krishna. They were laying down in puddles of water, full of pebbles and water, and they got up all black, and Prabhupada just kind of smiled and laughed them on. And as they entered the room, many reporters from the Fleet Street gang, the very kind of gutter press of England, the very silly newspapers, they had turned out in force, and they said, why have you come here? What are you trying to teach? And Prabhupada immediately replied, I'm teaching what you have all forgotten, and that is God. And that kind of stopped everybody for a few seconds, questioning him. And then Prabhupada started a big kirtan, and they were flashing their cameras and so on. And the next morning, there was a newspaper called the Daily Sketch, which had a big photograph of Prabhupada in ecstasy. His eyes were closed, and he was kind of looking off to the side, and he was chanting. And Prabhupada had one of his artists paint. He liked that picture so much that he had one of his artists paint a picture of that black and white photograph. And that newspaper no longer exists, by the way. I looked for it, but I don't even know if the photograph still exists. But the newspaper, the Daily Sketch, does not exist anymore. So those were the things. And then so Prabhupada was kind of treated as a celebrity. They didn't know much about Krishna consciousness. And then we were all invited to a program called the Late Night Lineup. There was a broadcast live on the BBC. And it started about 11 o'clock at night. So they came to collect us in a BBC van, and they interviewed all the devotees. The interviewer was sitting on the floor on a carpet, and he asked Prabhupada, "Is there a conception of?" They finally came to Prabhupada, who was the last person to be interviewed, and they asked him, "Is there a concept of hell in your religion?" And Prabhupada's reply was, "This is hell. London is hell." And that became the soundbite for the newspapers the next day. Holy man says London is hell. And then the interviewer kind of lost his cool at that point. He didn't know what to say, and there was this dead silence. And on a television or in a live radio or television broadcast, just a few seconds of silence is kind of like looked down upon. So Prabhupada kind of realized that this man had really, he had lost it. He didn't know what to say when he heard that London was hell. And he said, Prabhupada replied by saying, of course it is a very great thing that in such a hellish climate that the British people have built such a grand and respected civilization. And then he said, oh yes, that's true. And then the interview resumed in a normal way. So that happened. And Prabhupada stayed in England. He arrived in September, and he stayed till about the middle of December. It was one of the longest times he'd ever been in any one place all his life, in his devotee life, for a long time. So that happened, and but at the very beginning, he thought that the temple that we had in the very center part of London, Berry Place, was too small. It was a big building. It was like a 4-story building, but the rooms, the floors were very small. And Prabhupada started with us looking at other possibilities of organizing a temple, and that just didn't happen for a few years. So I'll stop there because we're a little over time. If you have any comments or questions, please ask. Yes, Ram? Pardon?
The son of Devahuti was genuine, and his philosophy was followed by all the acharyas. So this other Kapila, was he like an impersonalist or something?
Yeah, there were a number of people who even masqueraded as Krishna with 4 arms. They had 2 artificial arms, and there are a lot of sort of charlatans. They still exist, and I didn't think they were, and I was wondering, why is Krishna so dismissive of these people of India? They're Hindus, and after all, it's a very holy place. And then when the second or third time I went to that part of the world, I saw a man wearing a sari and singing in a baritone voice, and had very hairy legs like men tend to have. And then I realized that there is such a thing as sahajiyas, men who masquerade as women and holy people, when they're really not. It's just part of the culture of imitation. And so that does happen, and there was a lot of that in England too. Priests, Buddhists, and people of all description, and the Hindus masquerading as holy men, but they really weren't. They were just trying to gain a following and gain a reputation, so to speak. So at first I thought to myself, that why is he so dismissive of all these people? And then I realized that they actually are a lot of cheaters. They're either masquerading or pretending to be holy people, like this guy who was dead and he was pretending he was in a spiritual trance. But I thought that they really existed. So that was the thing that made a lot of people sort of really appreciate Prabhupada, that he was not only giving the absolute truth, but he was saying that there's a lot of people who pretend that they're holy people, that they're really not. And then a few days ago, I was watching a television interview by a guy named Michael Aspen, I think his name was, a British television talk show. And this was shortly after John Lennon got assassinated, and this man was interviewing George Harrison and Ringo Starr. And when it came to how they took John Lennon's death, they both told about where they were when it happened and how they got the news and how they were devastated, really devastated, that a friend of their band leader had died in such a horrible way, was shot dead by a raving lunatic who ultimately pleaded the insanity charge, and now he's walking around a free man. But anyway, what I was going to say is that when it came to them saying how they reacted to it, George talked about how John Lennon is still alive somewhere because he's not the body. I thought that way, even though it's not exactly our philosophy, because we're personalists, and that was a bit of impersonal philosophy. But that was actually said, and it went out to the London Weekend Television, to a lot of people, millions of people at that time. There were just a few talk shows, anyway, that really happened. So any other, yes?
Thank you, Prabhu, for class. You mentioned that Devahuti was in transcendental bliss while still in the body in this material world. and Prabhupada and Jesus Christ, they experienced this whilst being tortured in this hell. What's the difference between the state of transcendental bliss within the body here versus in Krishna Loka?
In the Bhagavatam, there's a shloka, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it says that the people who are aloof from materialism are either completely insane, mad, crackers or whatever, and people who are transcendentalists. They're completely oblivious to what's going on in the material world. And that everybody in between is a materialist. They're very enamored with beautiful music, beautiful people, airplanes, and that's their life, and getting wealth. But they're very rare. There's people who are completely mad and people who are completely aloof. They're very, very rare. When I was in Zurich, Switzerland, there's a park called the Spritzplaza. I don't know why they call it the Spritzplaza, but that's what it's called. And at about 6 in the morning, I was walking through there with a few devotees from Zurich, and we were chanting our rounds. And about half the people that were drug addicts, the government was then supplying them needles and apomorphine, which is a pure form of heroin. They were saying Hare Krishna to us. So they were both a little crazy from drug addicts. And I realized that there was a Krishna conscious streak in even people who were, the dregs of society. But there's a difference between people that are enamored by materialism and people who are free of that attraction. Because when people walk down the streets of a big city and the main street, they hear music playing out of the record shops, and they think that's really good stuff. But most of us are hopefully, the Hare Krishna people are not in love with that kind of life.
Thank you, Prabhu.
You're welcome. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for coming and giving classes. It's lovely to see you again. My question is just then, you said George Harrison commented on John Lennon's passing, and he said he'd lived on, and then you said it was impersonal. Could you comment on that, please?
I don't know what his philosophy, this person who is now departed, his philosophy is, but from what I know, it's an impersonal philosophy. It's the concept that we're all one, and that Krishna's not a person. Krishna's a force or an energy. God is a force or an energy. So we might say that there are only a few people in the world, a very small percentage of the people who know that Krishna is a person. And there's a lot of religions or pseudo religions who think that, and they're not only of non-devotees, but even amongst the devotees, there's some of that going on. Impersonalism, we call it.
So was that the interviewer that said that?
No, that was the person being interviewed who said that.
George
The interviewer was
Harrison.
a guy named, who's still alive, named Michael Alston, I think. And it was in London. It was an imitation of an American live television interview, like the Dick Cavett show. And Dick Cavett is very stern, and this guy was very, personal, very smiley and happy. So any other comments or questions?
There is a lot of impersonalism. People don't really know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality.
Yeah, as far as I know, the majority of the people who live in Asia, where Vaishnavas are thriving, are impersonalists. It's a step, but it's a step to avoid perfection. So most of the people, when we have a big kirtan in a big city like Mumbai or Delhi, the people gather around because it's their religion. But they don't understand the depths of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Only a few people are fortunate enough to have that kind of conviction. Most of them are sitting in this room, but there's a lot of them that aren't. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll stop at that point, and Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.